Okay, live stream is up. Recording is going. You don't have any
Okay.
members online, right? Doesn't look like you have any committee members online, right?
Yeah, we do. No, we don't. I'm sorry. No.
Okay, good.
This is a lot.
For whatever
Yeah,
form
to
Or
look at today and make it,
yeah,
but since we're probably gonna end up,
splitting it.
yeah.
Okay, so, good evening, everyone. I'm Naomi Pemberton. I'm the chair of the Ethics and Disciplinary Committee. Today, we're going to, have a guest, Alex Kipp, present, from the Conflict of Interest Board. But before that, Miguel, did you, submit minutes yet?
they are not.
Done yet? Okay.
They're not done.
Okay, so right now we don't have minutes available to approve, so we're gonna move on to Alex. Alex is the Director of Education and Engagement for the New York City Conflict of Interest Board. I'm very excited because I've been talking to Alex and Gavin for a couple of months now, so I'm glad that we're able to finalize a date and a time. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart to come and talk to us this evening. I'm very excited about this. Okay, whenever you're ready, Alex.
Jasmine is still here, but.
Okay, I'm in a meeting, so, all right, thanks. Okay. Hey, friends, I'm ready to share some slides. You ready for me to do this thing?
Yeah.
They were closing up the office, so just checking if I
Oh,
was,
okay.
okay, here we go. Okay, friends, so some of you have had this before, some of you haven't. I'm gonna go really quickly on all your responsibilities under the conflicts of interest law in terms of community board member service. I'm gonna talk real fast. I'm gonna push out a lot of stuff. If you have questions, just write them down, or if you're in virtual land, you can put them in the chat or just hold them. But write them down as soon as you got them, and I'll address as soon as many as I can when we get to the end. I know my time is short because you got other things to do, which is fine. And lean on us if you've got questions. If we don't get everything tonight, that's fine. Just know that we're here to answer your questions one-on-one, confidentially, for free, whenever you've got one that concerns Chapter 68 of the City Charter. And I would say just err on the side of caution. Like, if you don't know if it's a violation, or if you want more information, or if you're not sure, whatever, that's a perfect time to call us. This is going to be our agenda today. We'll just do sort of core functions of the board real quick. Then we'll cover the basics of the law. And the basics of the law really for community board members are all about sort of voting. That's what we'll spend the most of our time on today. As you know, Chapter 68 of the City Charter, which is this administrative law set up in the City Charter, is supposed to set kind of bright line norms about dealing with conflicts between public duties and private interests for public servants. Now, what's interesting about that for community board members is that while the law does apply to you like it does to other people, there's a special section that really addresses voting, which is like 90% of what a community board member has to think about. Also, I would say that with voting, the way the law is structured is a little bit different than it is for like the rank and file people like me who work for a salary for New York City, insofar as while voting, while conflicts of interest may prohibit you from voting, they may not prohibit you from participating in discussions, which is very different. Like, if I face a conflict of interest in my job, like let's say a hiring decision where a relative was being considered, not only could I not hire my relative, I couldn't even recommend or participate in the discussions about my relative. But there may be times where you face a conflict of interest where you can't vote, where still you're allowed to participate in discussions if you disclose. We'll get into that in a second. So this is the law's preamble: preserve and promote public integrity by helping public servants address conflicts between public duties, private interests before those become ethics violations. The big thing for you to think about is outside conflicts. It's your, and these, for, you know, again, public servants like me, we think of like all the stuff you do on the outside as extra, but it's reversed for you. Like, you are first and foremost a private citizen who gives up some of your valuable time for this important community board service. But conflicts may come up when something for vote comes up related to your own financial interests or the financial interests of an associated party, like your clients, your business partners, your employer, a not-for-profit board if you sit on that board, even for no pay, your roommates, your close relatives, debtors, creditors. And then there's this other really broad class of places where because of your outside responsibilities, you're precluded from voting. And that's if you have a position in a governmental organization or quasi-governmental organization. And that's the stuff listed on the right hand here. I'm going to get into all the details of this in just a second, so don't worry about that. What do we do real quickly? Well, we do training. That's this. There you go. We used to do Twitter. Now we don't do that because I don't know, you know, this psychopath runs the Twitter platform now, so we don't do that. We used to have a lot of fun with that. Then we were doing TikTok for a while, and then somebody else told us we couldn't do TikToks in government, so that's done. So I don't know, follow us on YouTube or don't worry about it and just call us when you need us. And that's calling the advice unit. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. The number one most important thing we do is give you free confidential legal advice about the conflicts of interest law. So we'll talk to you anytime you call us, 9 to 5. You can get a hold of us on the website. Everything's free, everything's confidential. And what that means basically is that when they wrote the law 30 years ago, they said the number one most important thing an ethics law can do is help great public servants continue to be great while managing their conflicts of interest. And that means they got to know that there's a safe place to get the authoritative lowdown on how to comply with the law. And nobody's going to call this ethics board if the ethics board can blab about the advice request. So it's illegal for us to do so. That's why it's there. And that's there so you have a safe place to sort of bounce off the ideas. Just please call us before you do the thing, because asking for advice from law enforcement about a crime that's already been committed is rarely a sort of viewed as an advice request. That's viewed as a confession, right? So call us before, and that way we can give you advice. We don't want to have enforcement cases. We don't generally do have enforcement cases with community board members, although there have been a few, and I might mention one or two. Fines can go up to $25,000 for one violation. Never seen that for a community board member. You could see criminal prosecution if a DA gets really interested in the case. Again, never seen that for a community board member. So let's move on to all the good stuff about just how to follow the law so you never have to worry about that. And like I said, the biggest thing is discussions and voting. And you will notice very cleverly in my design expertise, I put discussions in green for a very important reason, because you're almost always allowed to participate in the discussions, even if you have a conflict of interest. What you may not be able to do is vote. So here's the bottom line on the law. You can't vote when you have a conflict of interest. There you go. And we are done. Yeah, I wish I was done. I'm not quite done though yet, because now we got to ask a question, which is, what is a conflict of interest? Well, a conflict of interest is when the voting on the issue, either in committee or in a board altogether, would cause a direct economic gain or mitigation of loss for your own interests, like your residents, your business, etc., or the interests of an associate. And again, that's that long list of, client, debtor, landlord, creditor, blah, blah, blah. The end. Boom. Except we did have to define associate, which we just kind of did there. So and just to think, like, this is a very, like, when we think of associate, it's a pretty big list. So if there's somebody, it's not friend, right? Friend is not an associate. It's a close relative, like a spouse, child, parent, sibling, or anyone with whom I have a financial relationship. And we're going to get into the details of that a little bit here. So this again is that list again about what's on there as financial relationship, close relative. And then there is a really key term that's important to understand when you are precluded from voting, which is this term direct. You cannot vote when there is a direct gain or mitigation of loss to your interest or the interest of an associate. So let's now do my sort of classic example here. And here we go. Friends, I didn't always want to be a director of conflict of interest training. I, at some point in my life, had some dreams, and I might still get to live out some of those dreams. And one of those dreams was to own a tiki bar. That's right. And now let me fantasize just further and say I am retired. I own a tiki bar. That tiki bar is in my community board district, and I'm also been appointed to a community board. Now, the question comes up, can I vote on my own liquor license application when it becomes before that, whatever committee, public safety committee, whatever it is, and you're going to make that recommendation to the SLA? Of course I can't, because that's the bar that I own. But the question then comes up in the sort of jurisprudence of how the board has interpreted this idea of direct. People have asked a really good question. What if somebody else wants to open a tiki bar very close to the tiki bar that I own, right? I'm not going to be able to vote on my own liquor license application because that's my tiki bar. But this person over here who suspiciously may have committed some sort of intellectual property theft, but that's a different problem, right? But they've opened a bar right next to mine. Well, I don't own that bar. Now, we could contemplate whether or not I'm going to get more business or less business. We don't actually know. Maybe this area of the Bronx will become the new tiki bar mecca for the entire 5 boroughs. Tiki bars are a real thing in Los Angeles, by the way. There's a great place on between Silver Lake and Los Feliz. Amazing, right? But in any case, maybe you could start that here. But my point here is that even though you might think, well, it could affect my business, that's not direct enough. So you can vote on somebody else's liquor license application because you don't own that bar and you're not associated with the bar owner, like it's not your brother, it's not your business partner, whatever, but you can't vote on your own liquor license application. That's what direct means here. And that gives us a little sense of what to do now, right? So you disclosed, hey, that's my bar. Then you're free to discuss like whatever you want to say about the bar, how wonderful it is, and then you do not vote. Disclose, discuss, do not vote on the liquor license application because it is your bar. Now, crucial to this, my friends, a lot of people ask about this discussion thing. When do I disclose? Please disclose before you discuss. Don't disclose like, here's bad disclosure after the vote. No, that's too late. Now you're tricking your community board members. You disclose. If you want to participate in the discussions, you must disclose, and you disclose before you discuss. Now, I did talk with my lawyer friends recently about like, what if you don't want to participate in the discussion? You're not going to vote because you can't, because it would be a violation of law, but you want to participate in the discussion. Well, then you don't have to disclose, but you also can't vote. But if you want to participate in the discussion, first, you got to disclose. You say, hey, that's my conflict of interest. That's my bar. Now, let's go back to that directing. Over the years, the board has interpreted other kinds of similar things where they're looking at direct versus indirect. And I can say with some confidence that, like, for example, let's say there's a vote to get the Parks Department to do some improvement in some park that's close to a place where you own your apartment. And now the question is, well, maybe my property values will go up if they do a good job, which we hope they do. What happens if they run out of money halfway through and now there's even worse than before? But whatever, again, it doesn't matter, right? Because that park serves so many properties around your neighborhood. It's not direct enough to that one apartment that you own, and therefore you're going to be able to vote on it irrespective of whether the values go up or down, which is too attenuated and too broadly affecting to really cause a disclose, discuss, don't vote. Second thing, there was a case in Queens where they were up zoning or down zoning or whatever zoning thousands of properties, and somebody asked, hey, I own an apartment. I'm also on the community board, probably going to affect my apartment values. Can I vote? And the answer is yes. This is not a rezoning that was targeted to you. It affects, you're just sort of incidental in this very broad effect, and therefore you're allowed to vote on the thing. Whereas if your building, where you were a member of the co-op, wanted to build another floor on the top, and the co-op was asking for the zoning variance, then you'd have to use the 3Ds because you're a member of the co-op that's asking for the rezoning, and it's only affecting the one building. That's direct enough to do the 3Ds. Now, what about in business improvement district? What is it? Is it government? Is it an arm of government? Is it not arm of government? Don't forget about any of that. We don't have to worry about that for this reason. Just if you're employed by the business improvement district, or if you're in a leadership position in the business improvement district and the vote comes up that it's going to directly affect the bid itself, you're going to use disclose, discuss, don't vote like we just talked about with everything else. Now, here's another example. Let's now move it on from the for-profit to the not-for-profit. And let's say I was on the board of MoMA for design expertise, of course, obviously. And so, and let's say it's I don't know, it's a Manhattan community board I'm on. I don't live in Manhattan, but let's just say, so I'm on the community board. I'm on the board of MoMA. And then now we want to ask DOE to fund another program for MoMA, or MoMA to fund another after-school program for DOE, or whatever, right? We're gonna disclose, hey, I'm on the MoMA board. I'm then going to participate in the discussion, and then I do not vote. Now, what about I pay dues to a not-for-profit organization? Now, am I associated with them? So the classic example, I get this thing all the time because people either love or they hate bike lanes. I'm not taking a point of view, so let's not mix up that pot right now. Do it after this meeting. But the question comes up, I think this guy shouldn't vote on this thing because he's related to transportation alternatives. What do you mean he's related? Well, he has a bike. Not enough. He contributed money to their, he's a dues paying member. Not enough. I was once a member of Transportation Alternatives, so I could do the century right. Obviously, look how fit I am. But the point is, just paying the dues does not give you legal responsibilities to TA, and that's true for any sort of dues member not-for-profit organization. So that's not enough to trigger the 3Ds just because you paid dues to some organization. The 3Ds are triggered if you're employed by the not-for-profit, getting dough from them, or if you sit on the board of the not-for-profit, which you're probably not getting dough for because that's a generally not recommended practice, but you're associated with them under state law. You've got a duty of loyalty, duty of care, duty of something else under state law to them if you're on the board of the not-for-profit, so you got to use the 3Ds, but not if you're a dues-paying member of the not-for-profit. Now, what about local development corporations? There's a little bit of softness here in the law. Not if you're a paid employee or you're executive leadership of the local development corporation, but if you're an unpaid part of leadership of the local development corporation, do you have to use the 3Ds? There's some old public advisory stuff that says, yes, it hasn't been looked at in a while. I'd say if that was happening to you, please write into us for legal advice and let's see what they say, because I'm not sure what the board's answer would be. So you have to call us for advice on that. Now, here's the third big topic is, what if your responsibilities aren't to the business you own? They're not to the not-for-profit you sit on, but they are to the government agency that you work at. Could be the UN, could be the post office, could be the city government, could be state government, could be federal government, could be a public university. And this is all, or a public authority like the MTA, could be the Brooklyn Public Library, the Queens Public Library. These are either governmental or quasi-governmental employers. And here's the rule on that. If you work for a governmental employer, let's say, I'll give you a good example, the Department of Transportation, right? And now you've got there's a lot of drag racing, as we all know, right? I live in Brooklyn, got a lot of it, right? And we desperately want like a speed bump on our block. I'm not going to get one because it's a bus route, so forget it. But in any case, you might get one in your neighborhood. And here's the thing though, you're also a DOT employee. You can't vote on the thing that's going to go to DOT for the service request because you work full-time for DOT. Why? Because the board's votes on the community board are supposed to be sort of unimpeachable. They are solely the will and the desire of the community board. And when the governmental agency, the person who works for the governmental agency who spends 40, 50, 60 hours a week working for the government agency for pay, votes on the thing related to their agency, it creates at least the appearance that DOT's got a person on the inside, right? So if that's happening to me, I am free to sit on the committee. I am free to participate in discussions, but I got to disclose first, then I discuss, and then I do not vote. So again, disclose, discuss, do not vote, the 3Ds, there you go. Also, and this is true for everything I talked about, let's say DOT wants to then talk to the Transportation Committee of the Community Board and say, hey, this is why you're not getting a speed bump, rewrite your request and maybe we'll think about it. And they're like, DOT says, hey, you're going to be there anyway because you're on the community board. Why don't you make the presentation? No. When you're a community board member, you're always a community board member. So you can't take a hat off and say, hey, now just pretend I'm a member of a different organization coming to make a presentation. No, if DOT wants somebody to come out, they got to send somebody else out there. You remain the community board member for the duration of the meeting. And there you go. Use the 3Ds, disclose, discuss, do not vote. Chairing. Community board chairs can have a conflict like anybody else. They're going to use the 3Ds like anybody else on their issue. They're going to disclose, discuss, do not vote. The only difference is that if I am a chair, then for the entire meeting, if there is an issue where I'm going to have to use the 3Ds, I cannot be the chair for the entire meeting. Why? Because the community board chair has some power to set the meeting, and we want no appearance of any sort of untowardness or influence, and therefore it's somebody else other than the chair who's got the conflict who is going to be the chair of that entire meeting. Committee chairs, same thing. If you're a committee chair, you're going to use the 3Ds, and you can't be chair of that committee meeting for the entire meeting. But there is another difference here. I'm going to walk you through this just with a couple of details. Let's say you have conflicts sometimes because of your private obligations to clients. Let's say you're an architect, you've got a number of clients that come before the community board, you've been asked to be chair of the land use committee, which ostensibly seems like a pretty good fit. Why? Because you're an architect, you know a lot about land use. I would say probably you're not going to be able to be chair of that meeting. Why? Because if you have to use the 3Ds more than 3 times or more in any given 12-month period, you can't be chair of the committee. That's the law. Why? Because at each one of those 3 meetings, you already can't be chair, right? So that's a lot of meetings given all the meetings the committee is going to have over the year. So you can't be chair if you have to use the 3Ds 3 times or more within a 12-month period. And let's go back to that DOT example. The DOT example, I can't be chair even if I only have to use the 3Ds once, and probably won't be once, because if I'm on the transportation committee, who are we talking to most of the time? It's probably going to be the MTA. It's going to be DOT. So I can always be on the committee, and my experience might be very valuable if I'm a transportation employee, but I can't be chair of that committee because I work for DOT. And let me just say something about your geographic assignment. Let's go to like an example. Like, let's say I'm a DOE teacher and I'm on the Youth Services Committee. Again, very good that I'm on there. I have a lot to provide. I can't be chair, though. Now, sometimes the question comes up like, well, hey, I'm a Bronx Community Board member on the Youth Services Committee, but I work in Staten Island for DOE. First of all, I'm sorry, that is not a great commute for you. But irrespective of that, it's not by borough, it's not by geographic location. Like if I work for DOE anywhere in the 5 boroughs, then I can't, or then anything that comes up before CB11 related to DOE, I've got to use the 3Ds, even if it's, involving a school I'm not assigned to, blah, blah, blah. That's what the law requires of us. Okay, tabulation of votes. Conflicts don't affect quorum. What does that mean? That means, let's say you barely get quorum, 26 people out of 50 show up, bam. But let's say 3 people have a conflict and they can't vote. Quorum is still 26 for the evening as long as those bodies are in the room. But vote tabulation will be affected. Here's an example. Let's say in a quorum meeting of 26 people, it matters up for discussion vote, and 3 community board members have conflicts of interest. Okay, that means that there are no longer 26 eligible votes in this room because 3 people can't vote. They can participate in the discussion, but if they disclose, but they can't vote. Now there are only 23 eligible votes in the room. And this is crucial because that affects the number of yes votes you need to pass an issue. Let's walk this through just a little tiny bit. So before participating in the discussion, this is everything I just talked about. 3 conflicted members to participate in discussion after they disclose. With the other 23 members, these people don't vote. Now, here's the thing. If 26 people in this room were eligible to vote, then you would need 14 yes votes. That's the majority of people voting who are eligible to vote. They voted yes. They didn't vote no. They didn't vote abstain. They voted yes, and that means the issue passed. Because out of 26 qualified, it's 50% plus 1, and you got 14, so the thing passed. But now we've got 3 people who are ineligible to vote. And so now that with only 23 votes eligible in the room, the majority of yes votes would be 12. Right now, you only need 12 yes votes to pass because there's only 23 votes in the room. So 12 is a majority of votes versus the no's and abstentions, which would be a combination of 11. And therefore, the number of yes votes needed to pass would be reduced because you have these 3 people who are precluded from voting due to conflict of interest, right? And that's exactly what this says here. I just did that. And so let me now just reiterate here. When you are eligible to vote, you can vote yes, you can vote no, you can abstain. When you are ineligible to vote due to conflict of interest, you cannot vote yes, you cannot vote no, and you cannot abstain. And therefore, just as a record-keeping thing, and I know I've talked to this at your particular board, Jeremy and Naomi, is I think it's probably a good idea when someone who is ineligible to vote due to conflict of interest, you do not say that they abstained, because abstaining is basically like a light yes. I'm not saying it's cowardly. I'm not saying it's a whatever. I'm just saying that the no's and the abstentions count together, And if they beat the yeses, you don't get it, right? So here, these people cannot abstain because they're not eligible to vote. So I would call it something else, right? Like ineligible to vote due to conflict of interest, which they disclose. There's something more artful and trippingly off the tongue than that. You can figure it out. Maybe there's an English professor on your committee. But let's move on to other topics. Okay, do you know who I am? My only note to you is that is best always, always. You only use the voice, which is the inside your head voice. It never works out as well as you think it will, and many times it could end up being a violation of the conflicts of interest law, particularly if you say, do you know, are you messing with me? Are you ticketing me? Are you giving me a summons? Do you know that I'm a community board member? Like that's an invocation of position to get out of something personal, and therefore we shouldn't do. And I got a question, does campaigning count? Now, here's what I would say is if you would like to, in your biographical information, whether you have written a book or you are campaigning to be something, whether it's community education council or it's city council or it's state assembly or it's a whatever, biographically, you can always share what you do and what your positions are. Or let's say you're a professor, your adjunct professorship, you can list your affiliations, etc. You can put it on your LinkedIn, and then everybody like a Stepford wife will be like, wow, I'm so impressed by all. I mean, you ever notice like LinkedIn is, can you imagine talking to people like if they talk to you personally, like they talk on LinkedIn? I mean, it's a nightmare. But in any case, you can do all that. What you can't do is invoke your city position or your community board position, which is your city position, to get something special, like special treatment or special stuff or whatever, right? So that's what I mean. Okay. Now, here's apropos of that, let's talk about how that fits into a conversation about receipt of gifts, right? I know that this comes up, especially in the Bronx, where you've got the Yankees, and there may be times that free tickets become available. There are some questions about that, and I don't want to dive too much into the whole Yankees Day thing because that can get complicated. You're going to have to talk to us about that if like the CB gets a big block of tickets and how do they distribute them and what can happen and who can go. Just talk to us about it. The rules will be reasonable, but it's a little complicated. We don't have time to like dive into that. Plus I want the lawyer to like sit down and get all the options with you, not the dumb training guy to gloss over it. But let me just paint this as a sort of a basis from which to operate. We've got Juan in green over here. Juan is a CB member, and for a long time he's been a regular at Dino's or the Dino's. I don't know why he calls it that. The guy can't write PowerPoint slides, I guess. A bar in his neighborhood. Occasionally the bartender buys Juan around. Now he's a CB member. Can he continue to get an occasional round? Yes. You know why? And I hate to break it to you on this, but when a bartender gives you a free drink, it's not because you're special, right? They just want a bigger tip, or they want you to come back next week or whatever, right? They'll do it for anybody. That's the cost of doing business. Now, let's contrast that with Juan on the right over here. Juan receives an invitation for the free dinner at the North Star, a new eatery in the neighborhood, seeking a liquor license, and that's going to be a problem for him to accept. And we've had gifts cases. I'm going to give you two of them right now. So this didn't happen in the Bronx. The first one happened in Manhattan. There was a case where this was downtown. Okay, this was downtown. There was a guy on a community board. There was a club opening up in the early 2000s in the meatpacking district, a place I don't frequent and didn't. Why would you on a city salary? Just a window shop, I guess. But in any case, so the community board was asked to weigh in on some land use or permitting issues related to this Soho house. This club was called Soho House, a club I've never been to. It was prominently featured in Sex and the City, a show I have never seen. And so one of the community board members, he was invited down to sort of kick the tires at Soho House, and he brought his girlfriend down with him, and so they're talking and they're looking at Soho House, and at some point, as alleged in the facts, his girlfriend says, "I'm hungry," and the guy's like, "Well, we were going to go out to eat," and the Soho House guy goes, "Well, you should eat here. It'll be great. You can find out more about us." So they have this big dinner, and no bill shows up, right? So he accepts this very expensive dinner. And then as they're talking, the community board member's like, man, I want to know how much a membership is here. He said, let me get you an application, brother. This is going to be easy. He fills it out. He gets the membership. He never pays the application fee, and he never pays for 2 years of membership. And that ends up being a violation. He accepted fairly substantial gifts from this very posh club by dint of being a community board member, and the enforcement case is about $3,500 price of the membership plus a little bit more. So that's one example. I won't go into the other example. That pretty much explains it, right? And that's a thing to avoid in terms of gifts. Okay, just a couple other things. Representing private clients before the community board, can't do that, right? So let's say you're a lawyer, an architect, an engineer, an accountant. If your firm, if your client from your private firm needs something from the community board, you cannot represent them. Because like I told you before, when you're at the community board, you're always a community board member. You can't take off your hat and go like, hey, now I'm representing my client. No. Now, if your firm or your partner wants to represent the client, you need a waiver from the Conflict of Interest Board to do that. Waivers are readily entertained. Basically, as long as sufficient firewalls can be drawn up between the client's matters and your community board responsibilities, we can figure that all out. Okay, so now let's move on to the next example. Sally, this is just to summarize. Sally's a member of a community board. She's also a partner of a law firm, or firm which is to represent client on a zoning matter before Sally's CB. She needs a waiver. And then once she gets the waiver, she's reminded she's got to use the 3 Ds. Hey, that's my client. I represent them on their whatever, their will or whatever. I'm working on that thing with them. My firm is dealing with them on this thing, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm free to discuss, but then I don't vote. Okay. Now, community board staff, they are considered your subordinates, which means 2 things. One, you can't get into a financial relationship with anybody on the community board staff, not the DM, not anybody who reports to the DM. They are considered to be subordinate to you in the chain of command. I know that feels really weird because like a lot of the institutional knowledge is with the DM and the people who work 40 hours a week, but you are the community board rep. They serve you, right? So you can't get into a financial relationship with them. You can't loan them money. You can't hire them to shoot your wedding. You can't represent them in court, even for free. All these things are prohibited. You also can't make a political solicitation to any community board staff because there's a rule that says that no superior, which technically you are to the community board staff, can ever even ask a subordinate to be involved in a political campaign. And I would suggest just generally, there should be no politicking at all with community board resources, community board time, community board meetings. I know that many community board members support their own candidates, may even well be candidates themselves. And we should just remember that all community board time and resources and personnel are devoted solely to the city's work. Electioneering is never city work, and therefore it has to be separated out completely. There's no safe harbor on that. Keep it separate. Okay, now one last thing about this. There was a time recently, I don't know if this is still true, but I remember in the Corey Johnson years, and I feel like that's, what was 100 years ago? But in any case, there was this time when community boards got a little of money themselves to give to institutions within the district. This wasn't like, hey, HPD or hey, DOB or hey, DOE, fund this not-for-profit. This was, we've got money. We want to fund that not-for-profit. Well, that's fine. That can happen. That's legal, right? But the thing is, you can't get it. If you are a community board member, and let's say you work for a not-for-profit or you're executive director of a not-for-profit, you're on the board of a not-for-profit, there could be a moment where you or the community board says, wow, this community board member has the perfect not-for-profit to provide the services we want to the community. We want to fund his or her not-for-profit. That can only happen with a waiver from the Conflicts of Interest Board, and those waivers are not given very often, and I'll tell you why. Let's say you got a community board member who also owns a grocery. And now you're going to do a block party and like, why don't we just buy from this guy? He'll give us like at cost. It's going to be a great deal. Here's the problem. There's lots of groceries. Now, because we're big, right? Like I'm from Manhattan, Kansas, which is like the antithesis of Manhattan, New York. And in Manhattan, Kansas in the 1970s, there probably was only one grocery store. In fact, there was one. It was called the Dutch Maid. It wasn't very big. Now, maybe if the Dutch maid owner is on the community board, you got a contract with him. And that simply is not true in New York. So the case would have to be made that this person is so perfect that the city's missing out if they don't use the person. And that's just a hard argument to make because there's so many different places to go to in New York. I'm not saying it's impossible. There's no cost to trying. You can always ask to get the waiver, but I'm saying the bar is going to be pretty high because there's just so many businesses in New York. Now, summarizing, where do you need a waiver? If your firm's going to represent a client on any matter before the community board, you're going to need a waiver to do that. And that waiver is pretty easy to get. The harder waiver is if the community board wants to pay you or your not-for-profit or your business to contract directly with the community board. That's very sparingly. You can always ask. Okay. Now, last thing. This is just an extension of everything else we talked about. So, if you are currently applying for a job at some place, right? If you're in the process where they're like, okay, we're interviewing you, and now there's going to be another interview and whatever, right? You can't then you got to use the 3Ds if that place where you're seeking a job is coming up on the community board. The classic example would be, let's say NYU or Columbia University's opening up some extension campus like up in my district, right? And now I'm applying to be a professor at that private institution. And now something comes up, a land use issue related to NYU, and I'm in the middle of applying. I got to use the 3Ds. Here's the example. Veronica's a professor of architecture. She's a CB member on the zoning committee. Columbia University's got a matter before vote. Veronica's got to do either, she wants to apply for this tenure track position at Columbia School of Architecture. Let's say she's already done it. That process is going to take a while, right? Because you don't get hired to be tenure track overnight. It's not like, you don't get hired to do anything overnight anymore. Like I remember the last job I got where I got hired overnight was it. No, it wasn't this job. I'm kidding. It was you know what it was? It was Kentucky Fried Chicken, where basically I applied to be a cook. It was the 90s. And people said, "Are you alive?" I said, "Yes." I said, "You can start now." I said, "Oh, great." So everything from that point on, whatever job it was, took an interview and another interview. And then I had to teach a class. And then I had to talk to students. And then I had to do this thing and that thing and the other thing. This could take 6 months, especially for a city job, now. So in any case, in that 6 months where she's being courted and considered for this job and she's courting them, she can't have anything to do with Columbia's matters before CB 11. Or she's got to suspend the job search, which she's not going to want to do. And then she can rule on the Columbia matter. I think it's probably easier to do it the other way. That's the lesson there. Okay, so now one last thing. When you leave community board service, first of all, thank you for your service. And then the other thing is, what about coming back before the community board? Well, you can come back and you can do your 2 minutes of public commentary anytime you want. What you can't do for 1 year is you can't make a compensated communication on behalf of a private entity, like a client, back before the community board. So let's say I'll use that lawyer example. I leave the community board. I've maintained my private practice. Now a client of mine is seeking a zoning variance from CB 11. They want me to represent them. I cannot represent that client back before CB 11 for 1 year. That's the 1 year revolving door ban. For all public servants. For you, it's only constrained to CB 11. You could appear before the borough president's office. You could appear before other CBs in the Bronx. You just can't appear for compensation on behalf of a private entity before CB 11 for 1 year after leaving board service. I didn't have any community board examples of this, but this is a very typical example. Department of Finance Director of Audits leaves city service to work for a private tax consultancy. Because of course, right? What else would they do? Going to work at Wendy's? No, they got the expertise. They're going to work private tax consultancy. Then there's nothing morally wrong with that. That's the world we live in. But within 1 year of leaving, he represents it, 8 times. He's basically trying to get deals for the private clients at the tax consultancy with DOF. That's a little loose with the facts. Like the disposition doesn't say he tried to get deals. The point is, it doesn't matter what he was trying to do. He contacts, finance, makes compensated communications on behalf of private clients 8 times, and he got a $5,000 fine. So there you go. All right, now we're at the end of it. So here's how you get a hold of us. You call us 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, especially if you're nostalgic for the telephone. You're just longing to hear a voice, then talk to us 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. If you're nostalgic for the postal system, you can write us a letter. You're weird. you're a weird person if you do that, but that's okay. We right. That's a very special kind of person who writes a letter, but you could do that. Or you could call us, or you could, there's a button on our homepage that says get legal advice, and we will, it's like an intake form, like a lot of places have. You write the thing, we get it, we'll respond to you by email. Almost everything we do with community boards, and we do a lot of it, is advice, and it's one-on-one. It's very easy to get, and the turnaround is pretty quick, and we know this stuff is time sensitive. So just call us when you need us, and that's basically your review tip for today. I'm going to stop sharing this thing here, and then we can speak if there's any questions. I think there was something in the chat? Was there a question? Chat. Okay. Campaigning. Does campaigning count? Okay. And like I said, campaigning counts. And I think I answered this. Like biographically, you can say in your campaign who you are and what your affiliations are, but we don't then say if I had like a palm card or a poster, I wouldn't say community board member Alex Kipp for city council, right? That's a bridge too far. That's a misuse of the title. Can you use your chair position on your campaign palm cards while running for an elected seat? Is that an ethics issue? Like I said, the line to be drawn is from the biographical to the promotional. Now, you could push back on that. You know, maybe you call us up for legal advice and say, I think that idiot trainer, like he's being a little too conservative. That's kind of my job. The case that you're trying to make is a palm card more promotional or biographical? I think, and not just conservatively, a palm card is promotional. So I would leave off the biographical information. If I did choose to waste my space on a palm card with my entire professional biography, then community board member, among all of the other things that I've listed in my very storied career, I'm totally fantasizing here, but would not be problematic. But that's not usually what happens, right? We're really cherry picking because the real estate's valuable. So I'm thinking probably the answer is no, but you want to push back, you can push back on legal advice. And other than that, someone said I'm rocking. Well, rock for you. Let's. Are there any other questions, my friends, before I turn it over? I'm sorry for taking so long.
Yeah, there's one question here.
May I ask two?
Oh, yes, two questions.
Yeah.
Director Kipp, thank you for your time today. Actually it's three I like. Do you have a podcast somewhere? Because it's very entertaining to watch. I'm wondering, where do we get more of you?
I'll tell you this. If you would like to get more conflict of interest, first of all, if I had a private podcast, I couldn't tell you what it is because then I'd be violating the conflict of interest. And also, I have really young children, so all of those endeavors have been put on hold until they get a little bit older. Now, second, if you want to see actually pretty funny videos, our TikTok account is still available. We just can't post anything new to it, but we've got really funny stuff on there. So you want a little bit more of this kind of flavor of thing, go to tiktok.com/@NYC ethics and knock yourself out.
Okay, and then serious questions. In what ways and again, this is just to help us navigate these ethical issues in case somebody decides to run for office here. Just hypothetically speaking, in what ways could a board member's candidacy for city council influence policy decisions or priorities within the community board?
Well, okay, that's an interesting question. And I think that it's true that there will always be someone either in the opposition or in the electorate in general who may, and look, we live in such a conspiracy time, like everybody's got their own, like, wall of strings at this point. And I'm not, some of that, like maybe I've got my own, right? But what I'm saying is that even though that's true, we have to think that probably a person who's running for office wants to do a really good job for their community as a community board member, because if they do that good job, then they probably will be looked upon as someone who is qualified to serve the people in this even more important position. So it wouldn't be a surprise that a person executes their official functions now in a way that might make them more appealing to the electorate later on. I think would be naturally intuitive to do. And I don't think that we should think that just because a person did that, that it means that they're somehow on the take, right? Those things get mixed up sometimes, right? Where it's like, I did these things because I think this is what my district wants, and I think it makes me look great as a person that you should vote for. I didn't do it because I promised somebody that I would act in this way so they would give me campaign cash, because then we've got a corruption problem, right? But people are always making decisions that either the community loves or hates, and we hope that the community board member is making them because they feel like executing their job to the best of their abilities and serving the community is what's going to make them look the most qualified for this other thing they want to do, you know?
Okay, and then just one more. How can a board member ensure that their personal political ambitions do not overshadow or conflict with the broader interests of the community they currently serve?
That is an interesting question that you're okay. We are always available for advice. And what we strive to do at the Conflict of Interest Board is give you advice that complies with the Conflict of Interest law, right? Now, the advantage of using us for advice is twofold. One of them is that so you realize, and this is kind of a long-winded way of answering your question, but one way that a person could use us is to say, like, I don't know if this violates the law. I need to find out. Right? That's one way. Another way to use us is saying, I'm pretty sure this doesn't violate the law. I want it documented and a record that I asked this question so that then I could choose to show that to people so that they know I haven't violated the conflict of interest law. So part of the answer is that we can be helpful so that it can be explained, or you could explain to the world, you've gotten your advice on these specific facts. You know that these are issues that are of interest to the community, but you've done your due diligence, and here's the advice. We can't share your advice, but you could share it with anyone, right? So that's one thing. Now, the larger conversation, or the more important conversation, is that people have to be like, I think that if you think about the spirit of the law, right? And I'm not talking about like, don't obey this, you better obey the spirit of law or we're going to come get you. I'm talking about like, why are we in public service? Is to observe the spirit of public service. And I think the spirit of the law is that when we act as community board members, we act in that charge, right? So if internally we have a question where we are conflicted because the road seems to divide between some legitimate loyalties, whether they be or interests out there, and what we're doing for the community board, I think that's a time for self-reflection to see, maybe I need to think about what my judgment should be on that. But I think that is a question that is probably built for equipment much more complicated than this basic administrative law, and that is your moral, your reasoning, your duty to this office, I think, is the thing that should guide you. Good question.
Thank you, Director Kip. I appreciate your time.
I have a
Thank you.
question.
Go, please.
There's another question. Mhm.
So this would neither fall under conflict of interest monetarily or probably breaking the law. But if we were asked to start an ethics and disciplinary committee, if we have a question that's just purely ethical, is that something that we can come to you about, or is there somebody else we should be going to?
I'll say, look, if you think that there's any sort of Chapter 68 issue to squeeze out of this, and sometimes the conflicts aren't necessarily directly monetary, particularly if it's, I mean, most of the time they're financial in nature, but they could be political in nature. There could be other things. But like, if there's something we can squeeze out of it, you can always come to us and let's see if we can be somewhat helpful. But I will tell you that you're right to ask the question, because part of the strength of the Conflict of Interest Board is it basically only talks about things related to this law. Because if we start opining to you about a bunch of things that fall outside of our law, like, what if people don't follow that? We only have enforcement power over this little tiny law that it was written 35 years ago. So there's strength in us being able to say, this is the thing we talk about. We really can't talk about things outside of that because we don't really, that's not the law that we have power over. I would say that The Borough President's Office, the General Counsel of the Borough's President's Office may be able to help you in situations where we're really talking about circumspection and judgment and issues that, and optics and issues that maybe rise beyond the basics of Chapter 68. So if you think anything touches on us, please call us. You might get, I don't think that's our law, and then we might refer you to the General Counsel of the Borough President's Office, who I think, whose mission to aid you may be a little bit more, maybe more broad than what ours is, you know?
Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
There's another question. Mhm.
So when you were talking about the voting,
Mhm.
you have to say, I am not going to vote. You can't be part of the vote and abstain when the vote is called. Is that what you said? Because I think people sometimes think of abstaining as not voting.
Abstaining with cause is what they usually state if they have that kind of conflict of interest. Abstaining and abstaining with cause is usually different.
Okay.
That's what my understanding is.
So that's why I think, because abstain is kind of used in these two different use cases, I would probably, I mean, look, I'm not a community board member. I don't want to even presume the complexities of the record keeping, but just from this sole issue that I'm concerned about, like, it seems like there's a potential for misunderstanding when you've got two things with abstain in them. So I just want to be real clear here. When you are entitled to vote, you may abstain. And again, I don't want to editorialize here, but abstention is essentially counted with the noes, right? Because it's the combination of noes and abstentions which you have to beat with the yeses in order to pass an issue. Now, if someone can't vote due to conflict of interest, then they don't get to abstain. Their vote does not count. They can't vote yes, no, or abstain, right? So the vote count is going to go down, which means the number of yeses you need to pass is going to be reduced by whatever number of people are not qualified to vote. So I would call it, again, I would call it something else. I'm just repeating myself from earlier, but that's the distinction, is like when people say I'm abstaining, that means they're qualified to vote and they don't have a conflict of interest.
Does recusing take that out of the equation? Take them out of the equation from the voting?
I mean, if you want to use, like, semantically, if you want to use that word recused, I think maybe just to qualify it and say, like, this person recused from voting due to conflict of interest, blah, 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 right? Say something like that. And that way everybody knows, like, oh, okay, so he's recusing. That means we're now looking at how many qualified votes do we have in this room? Because he's not part of that. So what's the actual number of people who can vote in this thing? Because this guy is recused, right? You just remember, if you're going to use recused, it just means that the total number of votes we're going to count, that guy is out of it now, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Alex, you were awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, friends. My pleasure to be with you this evening. If I can be of any, Naomi, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send to you after this. I'm going to send you like a little flyer. It's like 2 or 3 pages. It basically encapsulates everything we talked about. You can have it as a takeaway, maybe distribute it to the board. Okay.
Well, yeah, and also I just want to let everybody know I also signed up for your newsletter, the email. So you guys can also sign up for the newsletter to get, you know, up-to-date information on conflict of interest. So it's amazing. There's a lot of nice articles and stories. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay. Thank you again. And I'm sorry, there's another question?
No, thank you. Take care.
Okay, take care. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to case 114. It's Edward Perez is the complainant and Bernadette Ferrara is the respondent. Bernadette is not here this evening. She had an emergency. So we're going to hear Ed's I'm sorry, I can call you Ed. Okay. Ed's side.
Before
First.
we start, I just have a question
Sure.
regarding process. Aren't we supposed to vote to see if it had any merit, only to stay with process like we've done with all the other ones?
Oh, remember, I removed the voting on whether to see the case as long as it meets the criteria, because that was an issue before. That was why we were voting. Yeah. Yeah, I emailed you a couple of months ago.
Okay, I'm sorry. So many emails going back and
I
forth.
understand. I emailed you a couple,
Okay.
because as long as it meets the criteria, like this is a privacy issue, as long as it meets the criteria, I move it on to the board to be heard. If it's something that, like, there was a case that came in and we spoke to, the
Because we
open
did,
meetings law.
because we did have such a backlog.
Yeah, so we had to.
And we.
That's why I
took
wanted
the-
to say
yeah,
that this,
yeah.
you know, something you want to see.
Yes.
Now that we have a standard, if it doesn't meet that standard, which is great, I'm not getting anything outside of the standard now, so we can just.
Probably because of that.
But I did say it months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Not that I'm saying your complaint has no merit. I was just
No,
going
no,
with the
no.
Process.
Please.
Yeah, no, understand.
Appreciate the questions and stuff on that. I want to make sure that it does have merit and that we're not wasting, I'm not wasting everybody's time.
So,
Yeah.
this issue is a privacy issue, which is a part of, which would be included in conflict, I'm sorry, in an ethics and disciplinary committee meeting, and I just want to tell you, like, if you're gonna speak, it's about 5 minutes to state what your issue is. And also, I would like you to provide a resolution as well,
Okay.
if you have one. And, let me see. And you
Question.
can- Mhm.
The resolution, when I go to present the resolution, can that be excluded from that 5-minute time? Can that be,
Yes, you can
Okay.
say, you can do your 5 minutes and then
okay,
express your resolution. Yeah. Okay. And when Bernadette, hopefully Bernadette will be here at our next meeting, and then she can respond, okay?
okay. Well, I gave you guys a printout to go, let me know when I can start.
You can start now.
Okay, I gave you guys a printout to go ahead and kind of make a motion to exclude certain testimony. I'm just gonna summarize it and you could read it later on your own. Exclusion of subjective characterizations. So, any evidence or characterizations of my actions or motivations of activism should be excluded. Subjective labels are very prejudicial to this and they're relevant to the question of ethical conduct that we're describing here. I want to focus on the ethical conduct and board procedures. And the fact should be limited to ethical breaches. Exclusion of irrelevant personal opinions. I want this testimony and everything that I'm doing here, to be real. So I would expect that the chairperson, which has labeled me as an activist, to go ahead and exclude anything that's not pertinent to ethical matters. And procedural context. I gave you guys some emails and, there's obviously official meeting recordings and things like that, that can speak to the processes followed and the actions taken and why we're here. My opening statement. Good evening, esteemed members of the Ethics Committee. My name is Edward Perez, and I come before you today to discuss a matter of grave concern that not only affects me personally, but also the integrity and effectiveness of our community board. I called for a motion to discuss leadership concerns in our last full board meeting due to a series of events that suggested a pattern of behavior unbecoming of our chairperson, Bernadette Ferrara. But today we are going to focus on privacy and intimidation concerns that have aided in the implementation of inhibitive communication procedures by means of restrictive interpretations of the bylaws. Since joining this board, I have become increasingly concerned with its transparency and operational effectiveness. The chairperson's actions, including the whisper of an audible no to a call for executive session, exemplify a troubling resistance to open discussion and due process. The invocation of the 90-day rule in a matter that discourages my active participation is anti-ethical to the very essence of community involvement, which our board is meant to foster. My case rests on the egregious and willful violations of privacy and the deployment of intimidation tactics by Chairperson Bernadette Ferrara. The unauthorized divulgence of my home address and slanderous branding of my advocacy as activism are tactics reminiscent of a bygone era of oppression. This has not only endangered my personal safety, but has also sought to dismantle the very pillars of open and respectful discourse upon which this board was founded. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight some of the ethical breaches. Breach of privacy. Chairperson's sharing of my private address without consent is a very serious violation of personal privacy and confidentiality, which is expected to be upheld by all members of the board, especially its leadership. This action potentially contravenes ethical guidelines that protect individual privacy rights that could fall afoul of legal statutes designed to safeguard personal information. Suppression of participation, the pattern of behavior that includes labeling my contributions as activism, and the dismissive attitude towards my request for discussion point to a systemic attempt to silence and marginalize my participation on this board. By undermining my ability to speak and freely act in my role, Chairperson Ferrara contravenes the principle of open governance and ethical leadership, which are cornerstones of a democratic and transparent community board. Intimidation tactics, the use of my private information coupled with negative connotation, labeling me as an activist, can be seen as tactics intended to intimidate me into silence. Such actions not only deter me, but also other board members from active participation due to fear of similar retribution by stifling open dialogue and robust debate that are essential for the board's healthy community representation. Ethical leadership, the role of the chairperson includes setting an ethical tone and standard for the entire board. By disregarding privacy and the voice of board members, Chairperson Ferrara fails to exhibit the ethical leadership required for her position. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of
1 minute left.
run through the documented and detailed pattern of behavior. March 13th, I applied for this community board, taking proactive steps and then I informed all elected officials and staffers that I had information, my intentions. Anybody that I had their email to, I forwarded them my application and I let them know what I wanted to do. March 16th at a leadership meeting, I introduced myself to this board, outlining my background and my intentions and proactive engagement. Then somewhere prior to August the 1st, Chairperson Ferrara publicly voices concerns on social media about political operatives infiltrating this community board, potentially setting a biased narrative against new applicants like myself. And again, there's privacy violation incidents in August. There's neglect of communication and responsibilities, suppression of new ideas and voices, and an overall pattern of behavior. Chairperson's actions reflect a consistent pattern of creating a hostile environment for new members, particularly myself. This includes publicizing personal information, ignoring crucial communications, and using bylaws to suppress active participation. This behavior reflects a resistance to new ideas and new voices on the board, as well as an apparent predisposition against myself, potentially influenced by her earlier narratives regarding the appointment of political operatives. And you know, I'm gonna end it there. There's much more, obviously, I ran out of time.
Okay, thank you so much, Ed.
Yeah.
So I don't know, does anyone want to ask any questions to Ed?
I have a question. Where has the label activist applied to you? Where has that come up?
So that came up in an email I gave you guys in the other package. It was October 11th. She said, passion and activism is one thing and patience is another. But, you know, again, I mean, just the word activism, nothing of what I was trying to do was being active. Like as an activist, I was trying to be an active board member, share my passion for certain things that I saw that were, you know, the feet being dragged on, which, by the way, we missed the deadline on the city of yes carbon neutrality. And that's where everything started. Sorry.
Twice.
Anyone else have any questions?
I'd have to read through all this to.
Okay.
So this is a lot.
I know.
All right, so
Sorry.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So we're probably gonna have to take some time to get to this. It's very unfortunate that Chairperson
Mhm.
Ferrara is not with us today. But to be fair to Mr. Perez and his time, I absolutely was there with the audible no. And I think that it's fair to say that he's clearly given us quite a bit to look at.
Documentation, yeah. So,
So I think we should take a look at it, and then if Ms. Ferrara would like to respond, then
Just for the record, and I would say this for anybody who wasn't able to attend their own hearing. Ms. Farrar is out due to family
I
emergency.
stated
Yes,
that.
indeed.
I stated that.
And I did say that it was very
Yeah,
unfortunate.
I did state that, and I have no, there's no issue with,
No,
my-
just,
yeah.
like I said, I would say this to anyone who's coming before the
Yeah,
committee,
yeah.
just so everybody in the audience knows why the person's not here.
And we've made our, allowances before, so.
Indeed.
For
For me,
emergencies.
I was
so.
just,
I just want to state that for the record.
Yeah, and the only reason I moved forward was because we were okay with moving forward.
That's correct.
sure.
Oh, okay, so you
That's
made,
the only reason.
you
Right,
made the
so-
time to come here, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, we want to hear from you, and then,
I do respect her family.
Yes,
members.
you do.
I just want to.
yeah,
No, absolutely.
so I
Are we
just,
still going to hear his?
I noticed that you have resolutions listed on one of the pages.
If I may.
Yes, we'd like to hear.
Yes. In light of the ethical.
Where are we? I'm sorry. Oh,
It's second to last page.
second to last.
Yeah.
In light of the ethical concerns raised regarding the actions of Chairperson Bernadette Ferrara, it is imperative that we not only address the specific incidents, but also implement systemic changes to prevent future occurrences. To this end, I propose the following remedies and solutions. Obviously, it's just proposals. Whatever the chairperson decides to agree to, I'll be more than fine with. A formal apology for the privacy violation, a formal apology, a written apology from Chairperson Ferrara to myself for the unauthorized sharing of my private address should be issued. This apology should acknowledge the breach of privacy and the distress it may have caused. This apology should be entered into the official minutes of the community board to ensure a permanent record of the remedial action taken. Number 2, commitment to upholding privacy standards. The board should reaffirm its commitment to upholding the highest standards of privacy and confidentiality. This includes formal training for all board members on privacy policies and the ethical handling of sensitive information. The chairperson should explicitly agree to abide by these standards with the understanding that future breaches may result in further action. Review of bylaw interpretations. An independent review of the board's bylaw interpretations, particularly regarding member participation and communication protocols, should be conducted to ensure that they encourage active engagement and do not serve as a barrier to member contributions. Any findings that suggest by bylaws are being applied in a restrictive manner should lead to amendments that foster inclusivity and active participation. Enhanced communication protocols. Develop clear written communication protocols that outline how information is to be disseminated amongst board members, including what can be shared, with whom, and under what circumstances. Establish a protocol for handling sensitive information, ensuring that all board members understand the importance of maintaining confidentiality. Training on ethical conduct. I think that there's something out there, a bill, but I'm going to go ahead and mention this anyway. Implement mandatory ethics training for all board members with a focus on leadership roles. This training should cover the ethical obligation of board members, including transparency, respect for privacy, and the facilitation of open dialogue. Regular refresher courses should be scheduled to ensure ongoing compliance and awareness. Transparent, compliant resolution process. Establish or clarify a transparent process for board members to raise concerns and file complaints regarding ethical breaches, and ensuring that these can be done without fear of retaliation or prejudice. An independent ombudsperson, I think is the word that I'm looking for, or ethical liaison could be appointed to manage and investigate such complaints. I know that we have an ethics committee here, but again, just in case the individual that is being complained about wants to bring in somebody independent aside from the board, the committee, I think that they should have that opportunity. It's not just about somebody that's bringing complaints. I believe that that person also has the opportunity to bring in an ethics liaison themselves if they wanted to. Regular ethics audits. Conduct regular audits to review compliance with established guidelines and procedures. The findings of these audits should be reported to the full board and made available to the public to ensure accountability. By implementing these remedies and solutions, we can not only rectify the current ethical issues, but also fortify the governance framework of the Bronx Community Board 11 against future ethical challenges. It is our collective responsibility to restore trust and ensure that the board operates with the utmost integrity, reflecting the values of the community that it serves. Thank you. So again, it's a number of resolutions and proposals that you guys can adopt, or the chairperson can choose.
No, this is great.
He chooses to
Is there
adopt
a
them.
way you can email these
Yes.
to me? Yeah,
Yeah.
so I can put it all together. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
If you can, when you receive the email, maybe send it out to Ellie, since he
Yeah.
wasn't here, and if he's gonna be voting, he needs
I'm
to.
gonna send it to everybody so they can have it.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you so much. So we will, be sorry that you have to come back. but-
No apologies
We
needed.
can hear, Bernadette's side, and if we have any questions for both of you.
I thank the committee for their time.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay. So we have reached the time in the agenda where we have a gallery session. Jeremy, I don't know if you're here still. Do you have anybody registered? Jeremy? Okay. Is it, does anyone online want to speak? You have 2 minutes. Raise your hand if you want to speak online. Okay, does anyone here want to speak?
I would like to.
Um,
Oh,
who's
Jeanette
that?
first.
Raise my hand. It was Diana.
That was Diana.
Yeah.
Ladies. It's you. You're gonna go ahead?
He passed it to Diana.
You can say, go ahead, and then you speak.
Okay, so I am saying this again because I feel that top leadership is not taking this seriously, let alone responding. Last May, 6 months ago, after the Ethics Committee held an April hearing, voted and presented a resolution, the full board voted unanimously to send a written apology to the public for the September 2022 public hearing on Just Home. The non-apology letter and cover comment from the chair of CB11 that I received by email dated July 27th, 2023, violated both the city charter and CB11's own bylaws. From the city charter, section 2801B, actions of community boards. Whenever any act is authorized to be done or any determination or decision made by any community board, the act, determination, or decision of the majority of the members present entitled to vote during the presence of a quorum shall be held to be the act, determination, or decision of such board. The unanimous vote of the full board was to send a letter of apology from the board. The non-apology letter was from the chair alone in violation of CB11's own bylaws. Article 11, Public Relations, Section 1. No statement, either oral in writing or in writing, shall be issued by any member of the community board to any person not a member of the community board in which the community board member purports to speak on behalf of the community board or any committee thereof, unless such statement has previously been approved by the community board, or unless the matter is reporting an action taken by the community board of a committee at an open meeting. In any report of an action taken, the member shall succinctly state the vote for and against the proposal if a vote was taken, and note the majority position and the minority position, if any. Remember, the vote was unanimous. Any statement issued by a member of the community board on their own behalf must be clearly identified as a personal viewpoint and not purporting to speak on behalf of the community board.
Thank you.
I would like top leadership and the chair to address this.
Thank you, Diana.
Thanks.
Miguel?
So I, this is not directly related to, this evening, I guess, but, there's been an incredibly troubling situation that has become very clear to me in the last week.
Okay.
And it involves a member of the public that I will not name at this point. But I will say that I am so incredibly upset, terrified, and hurt that I want this. I couldn't wait until the full board. And I want this to be on record. At the October 2022 full board meeting on the 27th, 3 other members, Christian Amato, Christine Culpepper, who's here now, and Malcolm Gray, and I voted against the motion to object to the Just Homes initiative. Following the vote, members of the public took pictures of us and were publicly calling out our names and writing them down. Mr. Amato asked me if I had a strategy for getting home. My response was, I'm from Detroit. But he did, in fact, ask me if I had a strategy. When I got home, I told my then partner what happened, and he was very troubled. 3 days later, a certain person of the public was outside my door. I want you to think about somebody standing outside your door with their arms crossed, staring at you. And I want you to think about your partner coming in and being like, you have to get off that board because I'm scared. So I just...
2 minutes is up.
I'm on the committee.
I'm
May
sorry?
I have another minute?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if that if at the October meeting and the behavior was related, but I do know that this person has a history of stalking CB11 members, going to their jobs, going to their schools, and I mean, literally, Mr. Amato, Hazel, Mira, Mr. Galnick, all have been the subject of this person's irrational, crazy behavior. I am further, the thing that terrifies me and hurts me so much right now is that she has now gone on a social media campaign attacking my Jewish heritage. Considering what is going on in the world right now, I will not sit here and let this person terrify me. I have put up with it over and over and over and over and over again. I will not at this moment. So I want this to be on record because who knows? I may not have a week to get to the full board. Thank you.
Here we go. Cynthia, 2 minutes.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to kind of piggyback off what Diana mentioned with regards to the Just Homes letter. I do remember that it came up at, I believe it was last month's full board meeting. There was some discussion on that letter. And I do remember distinctly the chair saying she had no problem bringing it back to the full board for a vote or approval or whatever have you. And so perhaps this is an appropriate time to start thinking about actually following through on that and maybe submitting it once again to the full board for review and an appropriate vote. Thank you.
Wendy? Thank you.
I am.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank
Wendy?
First of all, I'm bothered by the fact that Miguel is in tears, right?
Mhm.
Because no one should be in that position ever,
Mhm.
right? This is a
Absolutely.
community board. We took an oath to serve the community, right? So how dare anyone use intimidation tactics to get their way?
Right.
So I'm gonna put the onus back as I did in the DI.
Mhm.
Right? You know where I'm going, right?
Mhm.
So at what point do we say enough?
Accountability. Mhm.
At what point do we stop hiding and protecting those who are the trouble?
Mhm.
Right? Because when I look at myself in the mirror, I have to like what I see. Now, we all have our beliefs, opinions, right? But when it comes to respect, everyone deserves that. No one should ever feel that way. So for the record, me, why I wouldn't give out my information is because of that.
Mm.
Because if you come to my house, that's a whole different subject.
Mhm.
So I want to put it on record because I'm charging this committee as I charge my own committee. At what point are we going to say accountability and start living by the code of ethics? And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy. Oh. And that?
I just wanted to say that as an ethics committee, it should not just be what is brought to us, but what we can bring to the rest of the community board. In terms of what Diana brought up, the board voted on it. It wasn't implemented. What the board voted on was simply disregarded. It was not implemented. Something else happened. So yes, we can bring it back to the board for another vote, which in my estimation is redundant because the vote stands.
Mhm.
And should the board not then simply say, do what we voted on?
Mhm.
Why do we need to vote again in terms of procedure, which I think is a waste of time? I think that what I have seen in terms of what Edward Perez brought up, our personal information is very important. As a board president of a co-op with 295 families, everybody knows where I live. And they knock on my door and they come in the office, and sometimes that is quite dangerous.
Mhm.
As a community board member, I certainly don't want my address out there because I have to have some semblance of safety
Right.
in my own home.
Mhm.
As a community board member who has looked at the media, and I hear in terms of the community board, nothing of what we're here to do and actually serve. I hear of different factions. I hear of activists. I hear of all of these labels. Like we no longer have the label of community board members. We're a group of emotional factions at odds with one another, or different ethnicities at odds with one another, or different races at odds with one another. And as long as all of the focus and the intensity that's coming both from without the board and from within the board is focused on and given frenzy and allowed to exponentially grow, then this community board cannot do what it is here to do and serve the community and be voices for the community. So ethically, when you have a meeting where a new board member has to bring something before a board because he feels his privacy is jeopardized and his safety is in jeopardy, and an existing board member is almost in tears. Is it emotional? Yes, and it would be emotional if I opened my door and somebody was standing there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this is not the first time.
Mhm.
As a board, each of us has to stand up regardless of what our titles are and take both a leadership and an accountability role, because if we don't turn this board around so that we can get rid of the isms and the labels and all of that other garbage, then we can't do anything for this community. And we might as well just stop because we're wasting our time coming to meetings where we have to deal with all of this instead of there are so many issues in our community that need to be addressed. And this just sucks the time and the energy and the life out of what needs to be addressed. So ethically, I think we all need to stand up and demand the changes that need to happen. And I'll label myself, I am a community board member. I don't have any other titles. And I pray to God, excuse me, I know you're not supposed to do that anymore. It's politically incorrect, but I pray to God that we all become activists and do what is necessary to change this board so it can be a functioning, positive board that serves the community.
Thank you, Jeanette. Malcolm?
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Just really want to echo everything that was said before. Um, I know things definitely has been tense. Definitely is an impasse here, but even I will, even state that I accidentally came across an email that was accidentally CC'd to me about a certain member on our community board inquiring to an outside actor, I should say, about information regarding me and even using my full government name, which, isn't really public anywhere unless you are related to me or my girlfriend. Um, I even saw that my address recently was, where I lived apparently was put online. And even for a few months, I also noticed that my family's address has been circulating online. I haven't said anything about it, just to not bring attention to it. Um, but I would never want to wish anybody's family harm or hurt, whether we disagree or not. I still want to see everyone, at the end of the day, be able to leave their house safely and to be able to go home safely at the end of the day. And I personally, like, I kind of do feel like I don't have that safety anymore. You know, I know I'm a bit outspoken, and that's fine. I'll own that, but it should never come to the point where it's taking away safety at the end of the day because things are already as it is tense, as Miguel has stated. I that I just really wanted to say that. I think I will email the ethics committee um what I saw in that email and how I addressed it because I emailed that person and I was accused of identity fraud in that email. So just to save that person face, I'd rather handle it off the scene and I'll email you guys about it. Just so we can find an impact.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Malcolm.
Madam Chair, if I could. None of us should have to be going through this.
I agree.
None of us.
I agree.
Enough. I am friends with every single person right here. We may not agree on everything. Certainly, me and you don't. We may not agree on everything, but why you're putting my stuff out there, showing up outside of my house, that's nuts. It's crazy. And I should not have to. I should not have to worry. Malcolm should not have to worry. Nobody should have to worry by trying to serve your community. It's just obnoxious. We do this on our own time. Not on any one person's time, not on any leadership person's time. I mean, it happens to where it has gotten to the point where it's just obnoxious and the temperature needs to be brought down. Or no, who's gonna want to do this? So thank you. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
I was crying, now I'm yelling. So
Thank you for your comments.
Part of the.
Sabrina?
Yeah. Thank you for being my therapy.
Serena?
Hello, I just I'm trying to get on camera so you guys can see me. I don't know if you can see me. Okay.
forgive, yeah, all of this. What's really disheartening about this whole situation is that as I'm listening to everyone, I know that everyone on this board is here for the community. And I have to agree with just everything Jeanette said, everything Wendy said. Over and even and I say that to just piggyback on what Miguel shared with us. Can you see me? I'm sorry, guys. I don't know if you can see
Yeah,
me.
but it's okay.
Okay,
Can't see
okay,
you.
okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, here I am. It really is extremely, believe it or not, courageous to be a part of a, I don't even know. It does definitely cause anxiety. I can absolutely attest to the fact that, I do check in on our board members to make sure that they have made it home safe. And I know that this is going to get to the ears of whomever, but the reality is that the narrative that is being portrayed is not the narrative that um, it really is, in the sense that ultimately we all want to get to the better good for the community. We all want to do the work for the community. But to know that, you might walk out your door one day and be presented with something unexpected is a real reality. And so, Miguel, I won't ask you to right now, unless you're comfortable and mentioning who it is. But
I think
there's,
everybody knows who it is.
I get that. But I think to the point that Wendy was making, like, when is enough enough? When are we going to really, and we've done it as a board and we've tried as a board on so many occasions, but Jeanette, is not the only one that's probably even thought about, like, what are we doing ultimately in the end if our work is not being put back into the community. So I just wanted to say that, and that was it.
Thank you, Serena.
We
Sure.
did, I guess just um, because I have to be careful with what I do say. Um, for the members of the board, we did go into executive session at a full board meeting about this very situation. But it has since gotten to the point that I am literally
Right.
that I had to say something.
Right.
Thanks. Thanks, Serena.
Okay.
Sure.
Can I say something? I just want to add, what I've observed, what I've witnessed, and clearly what everyone has, talked about is something that I've been unfortunately a witness to. The campaign to discredit us, to cast a shadow of doubt about our intentions on this board, not only is something that permeates on this board with certain members, but it also goes outside of this board with community members. I'm disappointed in some of the people who have done it because I thought we had made some segue in our relationships. But I see clearly now that people are using this opportunity for whatever reasons. It's an unfair portrayal of the people on this board. Yeah, I mean, there's so much else that I could say, but I think that, whatever is had to be said is said already. I intend to escalate it, with the proper organizations about the harassment and, some of the slander that has been directed and, at me personally. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I heard all of your comments and concerns, and I think the appropriate thing is to, bring this up at full board Since it was addressed already in executive session, I think you need to bring up that that was already done in executive session and holds members of the board accountable to follow through on some type of resolution. So that's my recommendation.
I know I believe multiple times we've gone to the borough president's office to try and
Yes.
find guidance on how to properly handle the situation.
Borough
Really
president's
haven't
office.
gotten much help from them whatsoever.
Corporation Council,
Yes.
Borough President's Office.
So I think this is something
So
that's
did
gonna
it
have.
go through council yet? Because I know the council
I
just
think
started
I
this
think
year.
they went through council. But I have to double check that, because I
Okay.
know we have gone to the borough president's office, but it's, in my own opinion, is something that I think the board is gonna have to come together as a
Yeah.
whole to make determinations on how to go forward with
We're
it.
gonna have to really get serious about this
Yeah.
junk. Because I can't. Like, I'd rather quit. Honestly. Because I'm not gonna do it. And you know how much I love this sport. You know how much work I put in, but like, no.
Yeah, and I
I'm
mean,
not
there's
having
one
somebody standing
person,
outside my warehouse.
it's not just one person either, there are other people, so we need
Several.
to find something that's going to work now and in the future for
Right.
all, I mean, we're volunteers, we don't get paid to do this.
Exactly.
We're here because we care about our community and we want to help our community. But outside people who want to make it difficult for us instead of working with us, because we could work with anybody.
Right.
We just need to be able to, sit down and have a conversation.
And it shouldn't take an hour out of an ethics and disciplinary committee
Right.
to talk about somebody that has nothing to do with
Right.
us.
Wendy?
So, what's the saying? If the head is not strong, then the tail is weak, right? So I'm not gonna necessarily blame outside folks, because if your house is dirty, outside folks are gonna act accordingly. So I'm not putting the onus on outside folks. This is us. And we know who it is or who they are. And the question becomes, do you have and I'm gonna say it, do you have the balls to stand up and say something? Or are you gonna be a coward and look the other way?
I think I just did.
As a new member, calling into executive session, to discuss the leadership of this board, the entire board should take a look at that and use that as a red flag. Why would a new member, right, have to discuss the leadership of a board? And I haven't even been here 90 days. There is a problem. I'm already here sitting with you guys on an ethical hearing. Like, are you kidding me? Yes, there is a definite problem here, and it is at the top. It is with the leadership. And I don't mince words. We need to discuss the leadership of this board. And if not, we need a clean house.
People quote me, I said it.
I'll bring the fantastic.
Okay, all right, so gallery session.
Also, I'm sorry.
Gallery session is closed, okay? Any old business? Okay. Any new business? Okay, so I'm going to motion that we adjourn. Anyone second? Awesome. Okay, everyone, have a great evening. The meeting has ended at 8:43 p.m. Thank you very much.
Close it? Is it? Oh, no, for the turkeys tomorrow.
Oh, right.
Okay.